It is closed. It's proper closed.
Oh no, not another U-turn. The shame. I can't bear to look at the comments, Esther. He's sure to point it out.
If you don't know by now, Jared absolutely hates turning around, but it's been inevitable on our trip around the coast. It's happened quite a bit, and one of our regular viewers has given him a nickname, Captain U-Turn. I tell him it's because he's so good at turning the bike around in tight spaces. We will just have to take the main road into Portishead.
Portishead. Locals call it Posset. They like to refer to it as the village. Now, we lived here for the best part of 25 years, so we know it quite well. Even when we moved in 1991, I believe, I wouldn't have called it a village. I think by that time it was well and truly a town. But in the years since then, it has just got bigger and bigger. And developments, particularly around the marina, are what I call Portishead Dock.
To understand Portishead's transition from village to town, we have to go back to when the port in the centre of Bristol became too small and inaccessible for the modern ships of the late 19th century. Steam and steel had combined to make ships much larger than in the days of wood and wind, and the River Avon and Bristol docks could no longer accommodate them. The docks at Avonmouth and Portishead were opened in 1877 and 1879 respectively to provide a more accessible port at the mouth of the River Avon that quickly took over from the floating harbour in Bristol. In 1884 the Bristol Corporation acquired both docks. Before then, they had been operated by private interests, ultimately controlled by the merchants of Bristol. The corporation also acquired a lot of land in and around Portishead, the legacy of which was still very strong when we first moved here in 1991. But, unlike Avonmouth, Portishead remained in Somerset, whereas Avonmouth became part of the city of Bristol. That might explain why Avonmouth became the preferred port of entry and was expanded with the building of the Royal Edward Dock in 1908. The 20th century heralded the age of electric, and as suspicion diminished and the demand grew for the mysterious new energy, so did the capacity for generating it. Towns, including Portishead, had small buildings where simple oil-fired generators produced enough for the residents that could afford it. These were soon replaced with much bigger power stations producing electricity for larger areas, and Portishead docks were an ideal location. The first Portishead power station was built by Bristol Corporation's Electricity Department in 1926 and began providing electricity to the city in 1929. By 1931, its steam engines were producing in excess of 100,000 horsepower. In 1948, the UK's electricity supply industry was nationalised, and in 1949, construction on Portishead B began next door to Portishead A. Sadly, Great Western Railway's original Portishead train station had to be demolished to make way for the access road, and a replacement railway station was opened some 400 metres nearer the centre of Portishead. Portishead B used coal and oil and started supplying electricity to the national grid in 1955. The power stations operated alongside each other and took coal from the South Wales and Somerset coalfields. Before the closure of the Somerset pits and the Bristol and North Somerset Railway that served them, Portishead power stations had been their main customer. The last trainload of coal arrived at the station on the 16th of November that year. Both power stations were fully converted to burn oil. The price of oil rose steeply in the 1970s and nuclear power had arrived just down the coast at Hinckley. Both stations limped along, but on the 15th of March 1976, Portishead A ceased generating electricity and demolition began. In 1982, Portishead B stopped producing electricity as well. Over the next few years, the huge building was demolished, and in October 1992, its two chimneys disappeared from the Portishead skyline forever.
But we're going to take a look around the old Portishead docks. You won't recognise it as an old dock, but when we moved in 91, they were still there, the old docks. The power stations had recently closed down. The chimneys were still there while we lived here. The chimneys were brought down. If I can find a bit of footage, I'll add it to the video so you can see. And whilst we lived here, over many years, they demolished the dock. You can just get a glimpse of it through there. Everything you see here is modern development, and it is literally transformed Portishead. And I think an awful lot of people would say for the better, in a very positive way. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from with that. And then some would say not for the better. Well, we moved out, so I'll say no more. We moved out, and this is it. It was a massive dock. The power stations were the opposite side. This side was Albright and Wilson, a chemical plant.
In the mid-1950s, Albright and Wilson built a factory here producing phosphorus, taking advantage of the low-cost electricity. If environmental scandals are your thing, then do some research about it. It seems corporate interests may have been more important than people's lives. On the subject of corporate power, the company that developed the dock into the marina and housing you can see today tried to ignore an Act of Parliament passed in 1814 that stipulated the right to a public wharf. Some say this right dates back even further to 1331. The local sailing club, who had put their boats in here for decades, were having none of it. It went all the way to the High Court, and the developer not only lost the case, but was forced to provide even better facilities than the sailing club had enjoyed before.
And I don't think they had any intention of providing this, but because the sailing club had the right to put boats in, they had to maintain that right. And back in the day, that big building right at the very end, that's where the boats used to be kept. There was only probably half a dozen at most, and they used to go down on a trailer, on a slipway I think, and put them in. And in the end they lost the High Court case, and the developers provided all of this, and all this area, this hatched area here, I got a feeling it is for the exclusive use of that yacht club, sailing club. But there's some lovely swanky bars. I'm not averse to chilling out in such places. But just didn't fancy living here. That's the Albright and Wilson office building. We used to walk here, do you remember that? And we used to walk the dogs when it was a dock and come down here, and the railway tracks were still here. but this is a coast adventure, so let's see if we can grab a glimpse of the coast. Back in the day, the docks had massive dock gates and locks at the end. They've been reduced in size considerably, so they don't use so much water when they're locking up and down. And you just get an idea, there's a little bit of the estuary out there, isn't there? You'd like to stretch your legs? Yeah.
We saw a lot of changes in our 25 years here, but Portishead had ceased to be a village long before then. In our bid to try to keep to the coast, not only along the roads, but in subject matter, we've missed a lot out. There's a pleasant, busy high street, famous for its Christmas lights, the world-acclaimed indie band that comes from here and is named after the town, and of course, the story of how, despite campaigns and political promises, it hasn't got its railway back. And the story of another rickety railway that ran from here to Clevedon and on to Weston-super-Mare.
Very little left of it now, isn't there? Very, very little remains of it. But they're there. They are there. Quite a big estate as well, isn't it? It's quite a big development. The old lock gates are still present in a permanently open position now. And then there's the new lock. They call this the Cornish fishing village, didn't they? That's what they called it. This is the new lifeboat station. And I think behind it, the old building is attached to, is the old harbour master's house. And I'm going to need a battery. This looks like a pretty ordinary looking pier, but it's kind of got a story. We're going to have to move on because we've got a car behind us wanting to take the space. But that ordinary looking pier has got a very interesting history. It was a grand plan of the famous Isambard Kingdom Brunel. The idea being is that his railway that ran from London to Bristol, Paddington to Bristol Temple Meads, would continue to Portishead, where the passengers would get off and embark upon one of Brunel's transatlantic ships, like the Great Eastern or the Great Western, and they would go to America.
Brunel came up with his plan in 1839, but eventually abandoned the idea. In 1845, the Bristol Corporation built the pier so that Bristol Channel paddle steamers could disembark close to the Royal Hotel. What you see today was only the base of the original pier, which had timber decks at different levels to cope with the huge tidal height range.
But that was the idea. But like with everything in Brunel's life, he was way ahead of his time, and it was really just too early for people to grab the vision and take to that kind of transatlantic travel. But the pier was built, but also so was the Royal Hotel, which we're going to take a look at very shortly. The other interesting thing about that part of the estuary next to the pier is for many years there was a ship, an old sailing ship, moored off the coast there, and it was a trainee ship for Navy boys. So the nautical school, as they used to call it. But it was quite often just a place where boys, orphaned boys, would end up in order to put them into a disciplined service, and they would be stationed offshore while they did their training. The boat never went anywhere, but that's where they would sleep and do all their training, all on board a ship. If you think about it though, what great training for living aboard a ship at sea, that they'd already got used to living in those sort of conditions offshore here Later on though, the ship was replaced with a building called the Nautical School, which is just a little bit further along in Portishead. Got a fantastic dominating position over the estuary. So there it is, the Royal Inn. It was called the Royal Hotel.
Now we're at the pub, the Royal. And then this is the view of the pub. You can see the second Severn crossing and the first one in the distance. In the foreground is a pilot bringing out a big ship from Avonmouth. And now we're going to enjoy a pint and a packet of crisps. Cheers!
And this is a little known road, certainly for anyone who doesn't live in Portishead. It's actually a coast road. The houses on our right have got elevating, commanding views over the estuary. Some lovely houses along here. Really fantastic houses. Look at this place in here. Amazing.
We're coming down into the lake grounds area of Portishead, but firstly we're just passing the Lido. Portishead is still fortunate enough to still have a Lido, and it's in there and it's really lovely. Massive pool and really deep. They used to have some really high diving boards. And this is also the cricket field, so it's quite a lovely place to come. The cricket going on and the boating lake, and there's a cafe. So this is Portishead Beach, but it's not really a beach. It's just a marshy area. Tide comes right up to the wall, high tide it comes right over. And then you've got Battery Point out there. There's your lovely lake. And the orange wall is the back of the Lido. Yes, it's facing south, the terrace, so beautiful for sunbathing and soaking up those rays.
Know you've been a good friend, and that's in the thick and thin, and I know it's never gonna end, 'cause you've been a good friend,
We're just passing the nautical school, but it's well hidden away. There's some big gates just up here, but we can't go down them, I don't think. But it's down there. Yeah. Gatehouse and church, and a very brief glimpse of the nautical school building. That's all we're going to get, unfortunately. It's a beautiful building. There's a coast path that walks along the front of it, so you can get a really good view of it then.
We can't leave Portishead without a quick mention of Portishead Radio. Regardless of where you live in the world, a lot of you will instantly recognise that name. Although it gets its name from the transmitting station that was on Portishead Down not far from here, operations were controlled from Highbridge in Somerset. Before satellites and the internet, Portishead Radio was the biggest and most sophisticated communication network in the world. It provided global wireless maritime and aeronautical communications from 1928 until 2000. The transmitter at Portishead was closed in 1978 and demolished to make way for housing.
Thanks for watching to the end. I think this is our longest episode so far. We're nearly home. Join us next time in what might be our last episode. There again, we've got Clevedon to get through, but don't worry, we only lived there for 2 years, so shouldn't have as much to say about it.